300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. And good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. A lot of sports to recap with you today. Some big news in the NFL, and especially how that's going to impact the draft. I'm going to reveal my first ever top 10 mock first round draft order and draft picks. This is going to be special. You're going to want to stay tuned for that. Some news with Sam Darnold. What does it mean that he's traded to Carolina, Nike, and Deshaun Watson? There's some big news with that. I'm going to break that all down. And then, of course, in the NBA, the Lakers making some news, Steph Curry and the Warriors collecting a big win. So a lot to unpack today, but we start with the just unbelievable finish to a tremendous college basketball NCAA tournament run. Baylor knocks out, absolutely blows the doors off Gonzaga 86-70 to win the NCAA title, claiming their first ever national title in Baylor Bears program history. But the real question is, how will this game be remembered? Because that was really the question that flooded to the surface of my mind right at its conclusion. The first thought was Baylor might be the quickest team that I've ever seen when it comes to college basketball. When you look at the pace that they play, or at least in a long time watching college basketball, the pace that they play is unparalleled. Their guards are extremely athletic, extremely explosive. Jared Butler was fantastic, winning the tournament's most outstanding player, scored 20.7 assists in the championship game. Those stat lines hadn't been recorded since Carmelo Anthony did it with Syracuse when they won the tournament in 2003. So you have Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, who was fantastic, almost reminds me of a smaller Donovan Mitchell in the NBA. You had Maceo Teague hitting down threes. Their bigs are strong, versatile. This is a team that plays aggressively, just hellacious defense. They suffocated the Zags right from opening tip. Did not give them any airspace whatsoever. Right from opening jump, this game was over. 9-0 quickly in the first couple of minutes. Next thing you know, it's 11-1, 16-4. You look up, it's 23-8, and next thing you know, 29-10. It was just an avalanche of threes, turnovers, defensive prowess being displayed by the Baylor Bears. And the speed and activity, again, the hands of Baylor, I don't think Gonzaga was clearly not ready for from start to finish in this game. They were not prepared to handle just the attentiveness of this Baylor Bears team and how in tune they were with what their assignments are, how aggressive they're supposed to play. And they played with a swagger and a confidence right from the beginning that shook Gonzaga to its very core in a way that really hadn't tested them since they played UCLA just a couple nights ago. And this is not to take away from Baylor and the Bears, because the run that they had And it's almost unfair because when you think about really good college basketball teams and you think about which teams coming into the season were projected to reach the championship game, Baylor was ranked number 2 all season, and yet somehow they found themselves as massive underdogs coming into this contest. They were doubted coming into this contest, yet they were the number 2 team ranked in college basketball all season long. And this is not to diminish what they accomplished, nor is it to take a shot at Gonzaga, because I'm going to give them a tremendous amount of credit. But to me, when you look at Gonzaga, unfortunately, this game came at the worst possible time for them, because whether or not they want to admit it, they were physically, mentally, and emotionally spent from that overtime thriller against UCLA. They had nothing left in the tank. They exhausted everything they had. They emptied their entire tank. Meanwhile, Baylor coasted to a win over Houston, and it was never even close. And I'm not saying that with a week's rest, they would have necessarily come out a little sharper, but I do think that what we saw is the lack of depth on their roster, on their team. They really play only 5 guys. Technically, they're 7 guys deep. They really only play 5 guys, all 5 of their starters, and that showed. And when you look at this team in college basketball specifically, whenever we recall historically great teams and we recall iconic moments and legendary performances by players, ones that leave indelible marks in our minds, they're usually followed up by an NCAA title. You think about in 1982, Michael Jordan with North Carolina, when the Tar Heels beat Georgetown in the NCAA championship against Patrick Ewing and those boys. Michael Jordan hit the game-winning shot to propel Carolina to that 63-62 win. He hit that shot with under 20 seconds remaining. That iced the game and iced the championship for North Carolina. In 1992, Christian Laettner's shot sinking Kentucky in the Elite Eight. That was a shot en route to winning the NCAA title for Duke and Mike Krzyzewski's first as a head coach. In 2008, Kansas against Memphis. Remember these incredible teams? Derrick Rose with Memphis. This was actually John Calipari's Memphis Tigers team. They led by 3, under 10 seconds remaining. Kansas dribbles it up the floor. It's a broken play. Ball finds its way into the hands of Mario Chalmers, who somehow sinks a clutch three-pointer to send the game into overtime, and Kansas ultimately won the NCAA title. In 2016, Chris Jenkins with Villanova over North Carolina to win the championship for Villanova. That's typically what we see these iconic moments followed up with, is a championship. And as great as Jalen Suggs' his buzzer beater was, as great as his buzzer beater was, and as iconic of a moment, and to me, it's the second greatest shot in NCAA tournament history. And as much as it will leave an indelible mark in my mind, not only as a UCLA fan, but as a college basketball fan, as incredible as it was, unfortunately, it's been marred now by their poor showing against Baylor in the NCAA tournament final, in the championship game. Because it's not just the fact that they lost. Teams lose all the time. Good teams lose all the time. It's the manner and the fashion in which you lose. That, to me, was the very first thought that came to the forefront of my mind when this game concluded, when the buzzer sounded, is it's not just the fact that Gonzaga's quest for a perfect season came up short. It's that now the sheen and the coating of that shot seemed to just rub off a little bit. It's a little bit more tinted now because they couldn't complete it with an NCAA title. And again, it's not always about winning the title. It's about not coming out flat, putting your best effort, putting your best foot forward. And I'm not saying that they didn't, because Baylor, again, deserves all the credit in the world. But when you see those types of iconic moments, those types of iconic shots, they're supposed to be followed up by a title. They deserve to be followed up by a national championship. And unfortunately, we were deprived of that. We did not get to see that. And so that was my first thought when I think back to that shot, and when I was watching the buzzer sounded, was less about congratulations to Baylor, although that is what I should be thinking. But it was more, damn, if Gonzaga had just found a way to ignite themselves one more time and find a way to complete this season after following up the performance they had against UCLA. Now that would go down in the history books, because that shot deserves to go down in NCAA tournament history lore. And it will, but it won't have the same magnitude behind it as it could have had, like the Christian Laettner shot, like the Mario Chalmers, like the Michael Jordan, like the Chris Jenkins shot, if Gonzaga could have completed and capped off their season with a title. So that's the biggest shame to me. That was the thought that I had that came to my mind, was it's just such a shame that a team that had such a tremendous season, this is no knock against Gonzaga. Listen, they went 31-1. They won their first 31 games in a row. That is an incredible feat for a team, for a school, and a program that's been overlooked in the West Coast Conference. It's a smaller market, Spokane, Washington, and they've been doubted the entire season. And what they're showing is that they are more than capable of competing against the powerhouses and the blue bloods in college basketball. But this was their time. And that moment seemed to kind of cinch up that notion that this was destiny for them to win. In a year unlike any other, they could have become the first team to go undefeated in a season since Indiana State did it in 1976. They came up extremely close. They got really close, just came up a little bit short. And that was the unfortunate reality. But again, congratulations to Baylor. It was a tremendous tournament. The closest that any team ever got to Baylor in this tournament was 9 points, Arkansas. So they were dominant throughout the entire tournament. And Drew Scott has a tremendous program there in Waco. And they've got some really talented players. And they prove that taking on transfer kids and retaining kids for long stretches into their upperclassmen days can be effective, can work. But that was the thought when I saw that game, was just, damn, Gonzaga really had an opportunity here. And now that shot will no longer be remembered quite the same way as it could have been if it was capped off with an NCAA championship. And speaking of championships and teams that have at one point won the NBA championship, the Golden State Warriors, clearly not the same team that they were a couple years ago. But it doesn't mean that we don't get the traditional and periodic heroic effort from Steph Curry, a guy who's a two-time league MVP, one-time unanimous league MVP. So Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors came back late to beat the Milwaukee Bucks 122-121 last night. But I don't really care about the end result. I don't really care about the score. This is just a regular, meaningless game on a Tuesday in the middle of March. Steph Curry dropped 41 points, the fourth time this year that he has scored 40-plus points in a game. I don't really care about that. But here's what I do care about. Just because you know something is going to happen doesn't mean that when it happens, it's not impressive. And it should be downplayed. Just because we knew going into the Summer Olympics that Michael Phelps was the prohibitive favorite in Beijing to win the gold medal, just because he ended up not winning one, but winning 8 in the same Olympics, doesn't diminish how impressive that was. Just because when Barcelona has a free kick, we know Lionel Messi's going to take the free kick, even though the goalie knows the only 2 spots he's going to score it in are the top right corner of the box or the top left corner of the box, it doesn't diminish how impressive it is when he executes that to perfection, even though we know that's what's going to happen. With Steph Curry, This entire year, this entire season for the Warriors, everyone knew the scouting report. Everyone has the same scouting report on the Warriors. There's no Clay. Draymond is limited offensively. Andrew Wiggins is inconsistent from three. Kelly Oubre has started to pick up his pace, but he's been inconsistent from three. The only guy that they have is Steph Curry. What's the game plan? Guard Steph Curry. Defend the three-point line. Make someone else beat you. James Wiseman is too young. He still has a lot more maturing and growing to do for this team. Everyone's got the same scouting report. The playbook is the same year in and year out. But this time, you can really hone in on one guy. And yet, just because we know what the game book is, just because we have the scouting report, doesn't deny the greatness that we're seeing. Doesn't deny how impactful this one individual is, not only to the league, but to his entire team. Because I love the phrase out of sight, out of mind. Because it's one of the most apt adages we can use to describe Steph Curry. People forget Steph Curry played in the NBA last year because he was injured pretty much the entire season. He broke his hand after 5 games into the year. The Warriors had the worst record in the NBA, 15-50. They were absolutely horrific. They were terrible last year. Just a complete shell of themselves. And so everyone kind of put Steph Curry to the back of their minds. They just locked him up in the back of their minds and forgot how truly incredible this guy is. And if it wasn't for the 10th seed in the Western Conference, if the Warriors were not just the 10th seed in the Western Conference, if they were maybe the same record as the Portland Trailblazers, Steph Curry would be garnering more consideration for MVP this year. This year, he's averaging 29.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6 assists on over 40.5% shooting from the three-point line. And that is on 11.5 attempts per game. 48% from the floor, 93% from the three-point line, from the free throw line, rather. Over his last 4 games that he's played, these are Steph's numbers: 32 points, 36 points, 37 points, 41 points on 46% shooting from the three-point line. Now, I don't want to over-exaggerate. I don't want to embellish here or overreact because Giannis was not playing for Milwaukee last night. And that's why I don't glean too much from the actual outcome itself, although Steph did score 11 points in the fourth quarter. But what is noteworthy and what I do appreciate that people lack appreciating nowadays, because everyone views the regular season as just pish-posh and doesn't mean anything, is that the competitiveness still lies within Steph. That drive, that hunger, desire to win. Doesn't matter what time of the year it is. Doesn't matter if it's a meaningless game. Doesn't matter what their records are. He wants to compete and he wants to win. And just because Draymond Green a couple of days ago pretty much poo-pooed the play-in tournament and said he's not motivated by trying to be a play-in team this year, just because Draymond Green said that, Steph Curry doesn't feel that way. Because the way that he's playing right now with the roster constructed around him, he's playing like he's trying to compete for a championship. Now, whether or not he does, that's to be determined. That's to be argued. I don't think, nor does anyone else think that the Warriors are going to win an NBA championship this year, but it doesn't deny the fact that he's playing to win. And this is a guy that has epitomized competition and competitiveness throughout his entire career. This is what I appreciate so much about Steph and what we were missing last year and when the Warriors were down was the joy that Steph plays with, that effervescent spirit that he plays with, that passion. That's contagious not only to the Warriors team, to their organization, but to us as fans. We want to consume more of that. Because when you watch Steph Curry, you see someone not like LeBron in stature where you're saying there's no way I could emulate anything he's doing. You see Steph step a foot inside half court and launch a three-pointer using a traditional shooting form You want to emulate that. And again, it doesn't matter what stage of the season it is. It doesn't matter what the records are. He goes out and competes, and we forgot just how extremely talented this guy is. And again, if the Warriors didn't have the record that they had, this is not DeMarcus Cousins with the Sacramento Kings, where the Sacramento Kings were abysmal, and he was trying to garner all-star consideration. No, this is Steph Curry, a two-time MVP, a three-time NBA champion, the best shooter of all time, the greatest shooter of all time, still working his tail off to try and fight for a scrappy Golden State Warriors team that has really no business with their roster competing for an NBA championship. I predicted they would at least make the playoffs. They seem to be on pace to compete for that. But again, I just love the passion that he's been displaying, because we don't see it enough from a lot of these star players who take the regular season for granted. And I think we're seeing with Steph Curry that because of his extended absence last year, he's appreciating, he is soaking in this moment right now this season for himself and for the Golden State Warriors fan base. So major shout out to him. That was an impressive performance, a comeback win, 122-121 over the Milwaukee Bucks. And transitioning to another current champion, the LA Lakers making some moves again. They finally filled out their final roster spot. Ben McLemore, the 8-year veteran sharpshooter, was formerly with the Houston Rockets, brief stint with Memphis, a longer stint with the Sacramento Kings, was drafted 7th overall in the 2013 draft. But he agrees to a deal with Los Angeles, according to Shams. And this is funny. This has been the year of just so much movement in sports, so much player mobility, whether it be during free agency or the trade deadline or the buyout market. Players just seem to be moving around a lot. College basketball, you look, there are at least roughly 1,100 college basketball players that are entering the transfer portal coming into this season. It's absolutely preposterous. The NFL has been buzzing this entire free agency period. Bill Belichick spent half his life savings in this one off season alone. There's been so much movement, and we're living in a new age where player mobility is so pervasive. That's what we're seeing across all sports. And it's so interesting because the Lakers haven't sought out the mentality that, hey, we want to fill out our roster with star-studded players to try and match fire with fire, akin to the Brooklyn Nets, right? They've said, no, we don't want to just fill out a roster trying to match fire with fire. We want to fill out our roster with guys that are going to complement our best players, and our best players can maximize their talents. LeBron and Anthony Davis. The Lakers said, hey, you know what? Their mindset was, we want players that we can surround LeBron and Anthony Davis with that can put us in the best position to compete for a championship, to have a complete roster from top to bottom. And when you look at their biggest deficiencies, at first it was the center position. They filled that. They filled that void by signing Andre Drummond. And what's interesting is now, and it's not surprising that now that Andre Drummond has been injured for a couple games with a toe injury, as his toe completely fell off his foot, Marc Gasol is starting to play better. It seems to have refueled him, ignited a fire underneath him. He's playing much better. But their second biggest deficiency was at the shooting guard position. They traded Danny Green away last year. KCP has been inconsistent. While he is a proven commodity in the postseason, and that is true, this year he's having an up and down year. Certain games he gives you double-digit points. The next thing, he's 1 for 5 from the three-point line with 5 points. And especially with LeBron and Anthony Davis out, they could use a guy to come in and buffer that scoring. KCP hasn't provided that. Talen Horton-Tucker is a really promising young player. He doesn't shoot the three ball well. He's just a driver and a scorer, a slasher to the basket, but not a real three-point shooter, just shooting the ball at 25% from beyond the three-point line. So they needed someone to come in and actually stretch the floor and provide them some consistent shooting. And now with Ben McLemore, this is a guy who's not going to play sparingly. I see this being a really valuable pickup for the Lakers. They are going to utilize him. He's going to play substantial minutes. Again, 8th year in the league. He's 6'3", and he can spot up in the corner. He can shoot it from the wing at the top of the arc. He's a great cutter, slasher to the basket. We saw that. And over the course of his career, this is a guy who shoots the three ball at a 36% clip. But in 2018 and 2019, he shot at 41.5% from three and 40.5% from three. So over the last couple seasons, he's been shooting at above 40%. And in the playoffs last year, a season in which the Rockets actually faced off against the Lakers, he shot the three ball 39%. So he's a proven commodity and guy that can stretch the floor. He's athletic. He's feisty. Again, a little bit more versatile than just your traditional kind of JJ Redick spot up in the corner three-point shooter. No, he can drive it. He can cut. He can slash to the basket, and he can provide a jolt off the bench and just create much more space, open up the lanes for guys like LeBron and Anthony Davis to roam around and play bully ball in the post. I mean, it's just a match made in heaven for this team. And so they just needed another consistent option. And I see this being a huge, huge pickup for them. All right, coming up in just a second, Sam Darnold traded to Carolina. What does that mean? And you're going to want to stick around for this. This is Jonah's first ever top 10 mock NFL first round draft selection. I've got a couple that are going to surprise you, but I cannot wait for those options to ensue. But first, as we transition to the NFL, Sam Darnold has just been a roller coaster of a player, hasn't he? His time in New York with the Jets officially done. He's been traded to the Carolina Panthers. But I wanted to take a step back and not just look at the trade itself, but say, okay, who was this trade better for? Was this trade better for the New York Jets, or is this trade better for the Carolina Panthers? And for me, when I look at this trade, this was way better for the Carolina Panthers. Huge upside if you're the Carolina Panthers. First of all, you gave up nothing to get him. You gave up absolutely nothing to get Sam Darnold. You gave up a 6th-round draft pick in this upcoming draft and a 2nd and a 4th next year. So there is so much upside with him. He's just 23. Again, this was his 3rd year in the NFL. This is about to be his 4th year in the NFL. And this is a new opportunity for him to flourish with low stakes. This is a low investment. You're still paying him on the cheap, and now it allows you to draft a quarterback that you also don't have to pay. So you're not just stockpiling quarterbacks just to have them. Now what you have is a situation where you've got potentially 2 budding future franchise quarterbacks. Now, I don't think Sam Darnold is your franchise quarterback, and I think that the Panthers will draft a quarterback, but that doesn't deny the fact that he could pan out because you gave up nothing for him. The other thing, number 2, the Panthers are a much more functional, well-run organization. The New York Jets were maybe the most dysfunctional team in the NFL last year. And Sam Darnold had to inherit that lineup, that roster, that head coach, Adam Gase, who we saw what type of destruction he could do to other players he's coached, Ryan Tannehill, but not just Ryan Tannehill, Kenyon Drake, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker, a lot of those Miami players, Mike Gesicki. He has had a negative impact and effect on more guys than just Ryan Tannehill, but Ryan Tannehill is the only real quarterback that we saw under Adam Gase. So from a functional standpoint, now you're going to a team that's coached by Matt Rule, who is showing, again, kind of some nascent signs that the Carolina Panthers are heading in the right direction. They finished 5-11 last year, but they lost by 3 points on the road to Drew Brees and the Saints. They lost by 2 points on the road to Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. They lost by 1 point on the road to Minnesota. This is a team that could easily have gone 8-8 if it wasn't just for Teddy Bridgewater. And I don't even think he was the biggest problem there, but he contributed to it. So he's never kind of had a clean pocket to work with. And a lot of his biggest issue in New York The biggest deficiency was he was turnover prone. 45 touchdowns, 39 interceptions, 11 fumbles, but a lot of that was because of the porous offensive line that they had and the paucity of receivers that he had at his disposal. So now you're going to a middle-of-the-pack team as far as offensive line. Pro Football Focus rated them the 18th best offensive line last year, 18th worst offensive line, however you want to look at it. But it's not the bottom third in the NFL. Better coach. He didn't really have great coaching at USC, nor did he have it with the New York Jets. So those are two key reasons. Then finally, it's a weaker division. Tom Brady is probably on his way out in the next 1 to 2 years. Drew Brees and the Saints. Drew Brees just announced he's retired, so the Saints are going to take a step back. Matt Ryan is aging. The Falcons don't seem to have much of a clear direction as far as where they want to go. So Atlanta's going to take a big step back. This is wide open for Carolina to step right through this door and take a step forward. And when we think about why Carolina was so good, is because they were a really tough-minded team. They always competed. They were in every single game. And if you've got just a slight improvement from last year, you can really do something. It's a very, very winnable division for Carolina. So for me, there's only upside if you're the Carolina Panthers. I don't see much downside. And the Jets, this is a move they had to do because they've made it pretty clear. They made it crystal clear by trading away Darnold that they are going to draft a quarterback, which means that if they were to have Sam Darnold and a rookie quarterback in the same locker room, that would cause all kinds of havoc and tension that no one wants. So this was a move that both teams needed to do, and I like this slightly more for the Carolina Panthers. They gave up nothing. You might as well just test it out. You can have open competition in the spring if you decide to draft a quarterback. So I don't see much downside for this. Okay, this is what I am most excited about. This is what got me jazzed this morning. Last night, I was thinking about this all night long. What are my top 10 NFL picks, my mock draft order this year, because the draft is coming up in just a few weeks. And part of what sparked this is because the Atlanta Falcons announced yesterday or 2 days ago that they are willing to move off of their number 4 overall pick, which means that they're sticking with Matty Ice, with Matt Ryan. And I don't know if they're going to draft a quarterback. It doesn't seem like they are, which makes this a much more intriguing draft heading into a couple of weeks. So for the purposes of this, I don't want to speculate any potential hypothetical trades. I'm not factoring in teams moving up or moving down in the draft order between now and then. For right now, we're looking at who are the top 10 teams in the order that they are. Where are they going to draft? So at number 1, pretty consensus pick. The Jacksonville Jaguars have the number 1 overall pick. They're going to draft Trevor Lawrence. This is a once in a lifetime type of quarterback prospect. Only Andrew Luck and John Elway received this much praise prior to a draft. Heading into the draft, this guy is absolutely fantastic from Clemson, and he's the big reason why Urban Meyer is the head coach there. If it wasn't for Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer would not be going to take this job in Jacksonville. He simply wouldn't be doing it. 6'6", 220 pounds, just the ideal quarterback. Jacksonville is in a complete rebuild. They need a new face of their franchise. This is a guy with tremendous, tremendous talent. He's going to be special in the NFL. They're going to take him at number 1. At number 2, New York Jets, they made it clear. They are going to draft Zach Wilson, the quarterback out of BYU. They traded away Sam Darnold. So that is a surefire sign that they want to draft a quarterback. They plan on drafting a quarterback. And by all accounts, Zach Wilson seems to be the guy. The biggest issue with the Jets last year at their quarterback position, and again, whether you want to attribute it to the porous offensive line, bad coaching, doesn't matter. Accuracy at the quarterback position was the biggest issue. Zach Wilson completed 73.5% of his passes last year at BYU. This is a guy who's 6'3". He's athletic. He's mobile. He's got a rocket of an arm, tremendous upside. And people really kind of have fallen in love with him. His stock has continued to rise just because he's extremely mature, handles himself well. I think he will fit the New York market extremely well. And so this is an organization that wanted to start anew, wanted to start fresh. Robert Saleh is the new head coach. He wants his own guy. The organization wants their own guy. Zach Wilson is the surefire bet at number 2. This is where things get interesting at number 3. San Francisco 49ers are going to take quarterback Mac Jones out of Alabama. Now, personally, I despise this move. I really do. I think that they should draft Justin Fields. I've been on his bandwagon ever since the beginning of the college football season started. The only reason why I'm actually putting Mac Jones here is because Adam Schefter of ESPN reported yesterday or a couple days ago that the 49ers are going to take Mac Jones. Kyle Shanahan is absolutely in love with Mac Jones. Now, the interesting thing is John Lynch, the GM, is leaning towards Justin Fields. So who gets the final say? I think it's probably going to be Kyle Shanahan because he's the head coach. But to me, listen, statistically, you can't argue against Mac Jones. He was absolutely fantastic, completed 77% of his passes, 4,500 yards, like 41 touchdowns, just some absurd numbers this year for him. And he was incredible at Alabama. There's no question about it. Statistically, I just think that from a talent standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, Justin Fields is just a gem. And I'm just surprised that the 49ers are leaning that way, but that's what the insiders are saying. So I'm going to assume that they are right and that they're going to draft Mac Jones at number 3. So now here comes the interesting pick with the Atlanta Falcons at number 4. I've thought a lot about this, and to me, they're going to draft Kwity Paye out of Michigan, the defensive end out of the Michigan Wolverines. This is one of those interesting picks because, again, the fact that the Falcons are willing to move off of that number 4 pick indicated to me that they're wanting to move forward with Matt Ryan for however many years that is. So they're not looking to draft a quarterback at this moment. And when you look at the Atlanta Falcons, what is their biggest need? What is their biggest void that they need to fill? It's a pass rusher. Their defense was atrocious last year, one of the worst defenses last year. They gave up the most number of yards per game last year. And part of that was because they weren't generating enough pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Now, the reason why Kwity Paye hasn't been gaining the same type of traction and attention into this draft is because he was injured for all of last year. Or he played for only 3 games last year. So kind of, again, out of sight, out of mind. But in 2019, in 11 games, he recorded 6.5 sacks. So this is a huge athlete. This is a guy who's 6'7", or 6'4", 270 rather. So just a pure athlete who can get in and out of tight spaces well. He can block up front. I mean, he gets opposing pressure, good inside pressure on the outside. I really like Paye out of Michigan at number 4. Again, they had a bottom 3. I know they had a bottom 3 offensive line last year, but their biggest deficiency is on the defensive side. At number 5, Cincinnati Bengals. I have them taking the offensive tackle Penei Sewell out of Oregon. Cincinnati has a porous offensive line. Joe Burrow was running for his life last year before tearing his ACL. Even with running for his life last year, the guy nearly threw for 2,700 yards, 65% completion percentage in 10 games. In 10 games. He had no time to throw. He was flustered and he was flushed out of the pocket all the time, and yet he still maintained composure, and that was with a terrible offensive line. And Penei Sewell is the best offensive tackle in the draft this year. In fact, he's arguably the most talented overall player in this draft. But again, other teams value and need the quarterback position to be filled before him, so I understand why they're leaning in a different direction. But again, Bengals had the 30th rated offensive line according to Pro Football Focus last year. Penei Sewell can come in and patch that up nicely next year for the Cincinnati Bengals. To me, he might be the most talented player overall on the board. But again, the need of the Cincinnati Bengals is to shore up that offensive line. And so I expect him to be taken at number 5, which means Miami Dolphins at number 6. I expect them to take the tight end out of Florida, Kyle Pitts. Listen, if this guy wasn't a tight end, he might be the number 1 overall pick this year. That's how talented he is. This is his size, 6'6", 246. He ran a 40-yard dash in 4.44 seconds. He's got hands like a receiver, like Travis Kelce. He's extremely fast. He's a burner for a tight end, even with a guy his speed. And this is the biggest question mark for the Miami Dolphins. Is Tua their quarterback moving forward? Well, there's only one way to find out. They want to surround him with as many weapons as they can to determine, is this guy our guy? Last year, Tua had a very pedestrian season, 1,814 yards passing, a meager 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 64% completion percentage. He really wasn't that good last year. It's not like he was horrible, but he didn't show flashes of great last year. And so if you wanted to attribute it to the lack of receivers, fine. Although now there's no excuses. You've got Devontae Parker. You traded for Will Fuller. You still have Mike Gesicki. And when they draft Kyle Pitts, there will be no more excuses. Their defense was a top 3 defense in the league last year, forced the most number of turnovers last year, led by Xavier Howard. So there aren't any more excuses once they draft Kyle Pitts. Is Tua the guy? That's the question that they need to see, because this is a guy, 770 receiving yards last year, 12 touchdowns, just a tremendous player and a tremendous talent. At number 7, the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions, listen, they need help all across the board. But the reality is they just traded for Jared Goff, their quarterback. What's the most important thing to a quarterback? A really good wide receiver. Kenny Golladay is gone. They don't have him anymore. So they need to pair Jared Goff with an elite wide receiver immediately to reap the benefits of trading for him. And Jamar Chase is, while there are a lot of really talented wide receivers in this draft, Jamar Chase has been the unanimous number 1 wide receiver for now 2 years. If he had decided to enter the draft last year, I think he would have been the number 1 wide receiver taken off the board. This is a guy who, yes, opted out of the season for LSU last year, but 2 years ago, in their incredible championship run, when they went 15-0, this is a guy that had over 1,700 yards, 20 touchdowns at LSU. He's a fantastic route runner, has tremendous hands. He's big. He's 6'2", or 6 feet rather. But he's bulky. He weighs a lot, and so I really like him. I think that, again, with Burrow needing, not with Burrow, with Jared Goff needing some help immediately out of the gates in Detroit. Sure, they could take anyone and they'd be an upgrade for them, but I think they really need to start to shore up their weapons to try and get the best out of Jared Goff. So I think Jamar Chase is taken at number 7. At number 8, this is another controversial pick, the Carolina Panthers. We were just talking about them. I think they're still going to draft a quarterback. I think they're going to take Justin Fields, the quarterback out of Ohio State. He's just too talented to drop any farther than this. And I think that even if the Carolina Panthers believe that Sam Darnold is their future, I just don't see them passing up on this quarterback prospect, because it's a low investment for both. Sam Darnold isn't being paid that much, and in the grand scheme of things, Justin Fields wouldn't be paid that much. I've always been really high on Justin Fields. I don't know why all of a sudden his stock has slipped so much. I thought he was the consensus number 2 pick entering this year. That hasn't been the case. I again believe the 49ers should take him at number 3. We'll see if they ultimately do or not. But to me, when you think about the Carolina Panthers, when they had their most success with Cam Newton, who is 6'5", 250 pounds, during his Super Bowl season and his Super Bowl appearance and his MVP season in 2015, he didn't even complete 60% of his passes. His best weapon was Greg Olsen. They relied on their defense and Cam's running ability to really take them over the hump to reach that Super Bowl. Well, Justin Fields is just as strong. He's just as mobile. He's just as athletic, 6'3", 230 pounds. He's got a rocket of an arm, and you're looking at accuracy. Justin Fields completed 70% of his passes last year, 69% of his passes in 2 seasons at Ohio State. So this is a guy, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year, rushed for 5 rushing touchdowns this year, 10 rushing touchdowns last year. I really like Justin Fields. I think he could be the perfect complement, and you pair an athletic quarterback with DJ Moore, with Robbie Anderson, with Christian McCaffrey. Their defense is still set. I just think that Justin Fields can add another element to their offense that they wouldn't have had otherwise before. I really like him at number 8. At number 9, Denver Broncos. I think they're gonna draft a quarterback, Trey Lance, out of North Dakota State. The truth of the matter is, and John Elway, I'm sure, would admit it to everyone, is they've whiffed on quarterbacks recently. Look at their latest slew of quarterbacks. Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, Drew Lock wasn't the guy. Case Keenum wasn't the guy. And the problem is that their defense has always been so good that their team as a whole has never had a weak enough record where they were able to draft in the top 5 or the top 3. In fact, I think if you're the Denver Broncos, whether or not I know this or not, they should be calling the Atlanta Falcons right now and trying to trade up for quarterback, because let's just assume that, again, I didn't want to speculate and assume that they did or that they are going to do that. So I'll assume that they're at number 9. They should be calling the Atlanta Falcons for that number 4 pick. But if they're at number 9, they need a quarterback desperately. And the reality is, Trey Lance, even though we have limited tape on him, by all accounts, he's kind of the consensus top 5 quarterback. He's the 5th best quarterback, according to most, in this NFL draft. And think about the circumstances in which he played. He's used to playing in inclement weather. He's a big, bulky player, kind of like a Carson Wentz type, who's used to playing in the cold, a big arm. This is not going to be a big transition for him in Denver, because the Broncos need a quarterback that's used to that inclement weather, that can throw through it, and Trey Lance could be that guy. So I think he could be a good fit when it comes to those players. At number 10 is the Dallas Cowboys. Well, Dallas Cowboys, they need help on defense. And while you could say, yeah, Jalen Smith isn't really doing it at the linebacker position, is DeMarcus Lawrence really worth all the money? Should they draft another pass rusher? Maybe, but their secondary is their biggest need right now. And so I think they're going to take Patrick Surtain, the third, out of Alabama. This is a big, physical 6'2" cornerback who's aggressive. He'll dislodge passes. He jumps routes really well. Again, he can play you straight up. He's physical. He'll deliver blows when you need it. And this just seems like the obvious pick. Again, another Nick Saban guy. I think he'll have tremendous success. And the Cowboys just need more playmakers and disruptors on defense, and especially in their secondary. And I think that he can come in and do that. Again, Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, YouTube, Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. So more details have just come out about Deshaun Watson. In fact, it was just reported this morning at around 6 a.m. this morning that Nike is suspending their endorsement deal with Deshaun Watson. This is huge news. This is absolutely huge news to me. Again, over the sexual assault allegations. In fact, there have been now 22 lawsuits filed against Deshaun Watson for sexual misconduct and inappropriate misconduct, sexual accusations. And so the reason why this is big news is not just because of Nike, but because this makes this all much more real. This makes it a much more grave situation. Now, not to discount any of the filings beforehand or to negate the fact that it was a big deal before this report, because it should always be treated gravely, and punitive measures like this should always be taken into account when you're dealing with something so severe like this and so harmful like this. But what makes this so real is Nike is a huge brand. So if they are the first to say, hey, you know what? This is kind of a murky situation. Do we really want to associate ourselves with this guy right now? No matter how talented you are, and Deshaun Watson is one of the faces of the NFL, is a bright 25-year-old quarterback in his prime. And a guy like that, you don't normally just drop him or suspend endorsing him unless it is absolutely a grave situation and potentially detrimental to your brand. And clearly, Nike, as much cachet as they have, as big as their periphery goes, they're saying, hey, you know what? We might need to suspend our endorsement of this guy. That says a lot. And I think that's going to be the first domino to fall, just the tip of the iceberg. And more of these brands that are endorsing him, maybe Dr. Dre, Beats by Dre, a lot more of these companies that are endorsing him, I think will follow suit. We'll see a lot of action being taken, and we'll see the ripple effects of this moving forward. Again, the first accuser actually publicly stated themselves, a woman by the name of Ashley Solis, just spoke publicly for the first time. Again, all these 22 women that filed the lawsuit represented by Tony Busby, Rusty Hardin, the defense attorney for Deshaun Watson. So again, just last week, April 2nd, the Houston Police Department opened a criminal investigation after a complaint was made. Things are starting to get a lot realer. And that is why, to me, this is big news if you're following this case, because when Nike drops you, that's when you know that, and they're probably privy to much more detail and information than any insider is, because that's how big of a cachet and of a stature that they have. This is huge news if you're following this case. Okay, final topic before my Malkin's Moments. The Masters is taking place this Thursday. It will certainly not be the same without Tiger Woods, wishing him a speedy recovery. But I did just want to give my prediction because it's going to take place tomorrow. And I thought it'd be fun to reveal my champion and my top 5 finishers. I'm not going to bet on this, but if I was betting on this, I'd feel pretty good in this bet. I'm going with Jordan Spieth right now. Jordan Spieth is still super young. I think he's going to win this year's Masters in 2021. This is a guy that is just coming off a hot streak, won the Valero Texas Open, which was his first PGA Tour title since 2017. And this is a guy who's extremely familiar with Augusta. In fact, if you look at his finishes during this 7-year run, since 2014 all the way through 2021, the first time he was really eligible to play in the Masters tournament. 2014, top 2. 2015, he won. 2016, top 2. 2017, top 11. 2018, he finished 3rd. And then the last 2 seasons, he took a little bit of a step back. But this is a guy who, again, very familiar with the greens. He's already won, so that proverbial monkey's already off his back. He's already a Masters champion. And I think we're going to start to see the beginning of a resurgence of Jordan Spieth in the golf world. I just expect him to play well this entire weekend. And so, again, he won in 2015. 2 other times he was a top 2 finisher. A 3rd time he was a top 3 finisher. So I think he's going to play well. I think he's going to win this whole thing. I think that to round out the top 5, the runner-ups are going to be Jon Rahm, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, and Patrick Cantlay. So we'll see what happens. That's what I'm expecting. Cannot wait to see that. But again, sending our thoughts and prayers to Tiger Woods, because this event is made by him, and without him, it is not the same type of event, not nearly the type of same event. Okay, finally, Malkin's Moments of the Day. Got a couple great ones for you. First of all, shout out to the Baylor Bears, as I mentioned to start the show, for winning their program's first ever NCAA tournament title. This is a major achievement for a team that hadn't reached the Final Four since the 1950s. Over 71 years. I think specifically 1950 was the last time they reached the Final Four. It's been 71 years since they reached that milestone, and now they finally claim their program's first ever national title. Big shout out to Drew Scott, that entire team. And this falls into my second Malkin's moment, which is Jared Butler, the star guard, the Big 12 Player of the Year, a Wooden Award finalist for Baylor. He finished as the tournament's most outstanding player again. He scored 20 points and 7 assists, which those numbers had never been done in an NCAA title game since Carmelo Anthony did it back in 2003 when Syracuse won the NCAA title. He led them to that national title. Major shout out to them. Then 2 nights ago, when the Masters tournament occurs, there's always a championship dinner that is hosted by the most recent winner of the event. And what was a really nice gesture is they left an open seat for Tiger Woods at the Masters Champions dinner. So Dustin Johnson was catering the event, was hosting the event, and so they left an open seat for Tiger Woods. I just think it's a really classy, really nice gesture to an all-time great who would have loved to have been there this year. Finally, or two more, Garrett Cole, the New York Yankees pitcher. I know no one's really talking about baseball. Now, I did preview my top 10 teams entering the year, and I have the Yankees and the Dodgers meeting up in the World Series. Garrett Cole's been off to a hellacious start, just pitching gems and all fire. Yesterday, if you watched his performance against the Baltimore Orioles, 7 innings pitched, 13 strikeouts, just 4 hits, 0 earned runs. Again, in 7 innings pitched, was an absolute gem by Garrett Cole so far. He is living up to the billing, playing up to that enormous contract that they signed him to. So major shout out to him. And then finally, major shout out to Luka Garza, the Iowa center, winning the John Wooden Award for college basketball's most outstanding player of the year. This is a guy who his jersey is retired at Iowa. And more importantly, this is the most amazing part about Luka Garza is he became the first college athlete to sell an NFT to help benefit the University of Iowa Children's Hospital. Just a tremendous gesture. And again, NFTs are becoming so big, digital currency, where almost operating like stocks that you invest in them and then you resell them to gain a profit. And all of those proceeds that he made off that NFT, he was giving it back to charity to the Iowa Children's Hospital. Just a tremendous gesture from a really classy guy and a guy who epitomized all the benefits and everything that we love about college basketball. So that's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. And by the way, sneak preview. Next Wednesday, I'm going to be providing some little updates and promoting it more. Next Wednesday, I'm going to have a special basketball player joining me on the show next Wednesday. So make sure to tune in for that. Again, every Monday and Wednesday morning, Joe, Facebook Live, Twitter, YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Follow me on Twitter. I love engagement. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.